Okay, hey everyone. I can't see any of you. I can see myself and Alex, so I apologize that I feel like I'm talking into the wind, but happy Friday. My name is Christie Scanlin Dobson, and I am the arts accessibility person at the state at the Kansas Arts Commission. I'm sure I've spoken with many of you over the past, gosh, how many years that I've been doing this work. I have a PhD in special education from KU. You might know me from there. I worked on coordinating the creative aging program a few years ago. So I've kind of been focused in my work at the state level on really looking at all the ways to be more accessible and more inclusive, and to make sure that across our state, across Kansas, all of the programming that we're doing, we're bringing everyone to the table. It's more important now, obviously, than it ever has been, but making sure that you're looking at accessibility and inclusion in terms of um, your budget, right? How you're writing your programming, you're building like the physical infrastructure stuff, right? How you're providing access to everyone, and then how you're developing your programming. So we wanted to meet today. We're doing these lunch and learns, an idea that our director Curtis came up with, and I really love it, where we just have an opportunity to gather once a month, really informally, and just have everyone who wants to come and visit about whatever it is that we're trying to cover and explore, just to come and chat and have access to myself and everyone else on the team. So I will finish my introduction by saying thank you all so much for being here today. Happy Friday. Um, we want to make sure that we share what we've got, what wonderful Alex has got, and then have time for questions, and just say to you all now, please write questions in the chat as they come up. And maybe introduce yourself in the chat if you have a question, so we know kind of who is sending the question. What are you running into? What are you up against? What are your questions about this material, accessibility, inclusion, outreach? The idea for today is reaching out, outreaching to you. So I'm going to introduce my wonderful colleague, Alex Kimball Williams. She and I have known each other here in Lawrence for quite some time. She's an amazing musician and artist, and has become a good friend. So I'm going to let Alex take it away. Go, Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. My job with the Kansas Arts Commission at the Department of Commerce under the state of Kansas is outreach specialist. And so Christy and I have worked together off and on. It'll be 3 years for me this summer, actually. So yeah, very excited to be with the commission. And I've been focused on outreach for communities of color, first-time applicants, rural communities, just kind of depends on what we're looking at. And I also have extensive experience in grant writing, putting together rubrics and criteria and equity language for programs and for applications, application writing and development, surveys, survey design, all of that good stuff. And then, like Christy said, I am also a performing artist. I perform as Bad Alaskan, and so I perform at mostly alternative venues, non-venues, and I do have an album coming up this summer that I'm very excited about. I am on the touring roster for the state. There are lots of really great resources that the state has, and one of the less talked about ones is I feel like a few of us now have virtual office hours that we have. Mine, for instance, are every Tuesday from 11 to 2. Just every Tuesday, you can drop in, ask questions, visit, get to know the team. It could be questions about our programs. It could be questions about other ones you're looking at. I'm definitely allowed to help you with other grant applications and things like that as well. So definitely reach out and let me know if you have any questions. I have prepared a presentation for today that is based off of the most, I guess, the frequently asked questions, if you will, that people will drop in on my office hours or ask me at our events. We do tabling and go to different conferences and stuff. And so these are kind of the most highly requested topics and questions that people have. And I know that before I dive into it, there are a lot of federal changes happening at the moment, and I would say I haven't included too much into this slide deck per se, but a lot of people are reaching out wondering, they have equity statements or they have mission and vision statements or, language that they might use to describe projects and concepts, but they're wondering how to adjust that now, considering the changes that are going on and what can they do, what can they say? And so I definitely am here for questions about that as well. I probably missed something in my introduction. I also work at Haskell Indian Nations University. And if you have questions about collaborating with tribal entities or the university, you can also reach out to me about that. And I think that these slides are going to be circulated afterwards, or you can reach out to us for a copy. But there is a full team that we have, and I have hyperlinked here the page with um, all of our specialties. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. There are three main areas for growth. As I work with applicants one-on-one about how to create applications that are eligible for the state funding and for other grants that they're applying to. These are the top three areas that come up for me, and I'm phrasing them this way because I think that funders and people who are curating programs and events should look at it from their point of view a little bit. So the first thing that I notice is a lack of, I don't want to say a lack of organization, but a lack of, the documents are not all in one place, ready to recall when they're trying to put together an application. They may have lost them, or things have happened. They haven't completed getting their CMUEI number, or just different things like that, and they struggle with budget requirements and templates and things like that as well. And this is a struggle for first-time applicants, smaller entities who I'll call tech tourists, or people on the mature age spectrum who may not have access to smart devices, or have trouble accessing platforms like Submittable, for instance, and may struggle to complete and submit applications for that reason. Also, applicants from communities which have been divested from. Um, and this is for a number of reasons. There's a lower administrative capacity to organize things and to be able to pull them back out. There's a little bit of inexperience as well with knowing what to have handy and how much time that they need to be able to complete an application. So there's nothing more frustrating than, you only have 20 minutes a week really to devote to these things, and then an application is actually 2 hours long. So being able to communicate with people how long that they should expect to spend on an application is really important in order to, get a higher response rate or get more people who complete applications. So I would say this is a really big struggle area, and I can talk about it pretty candidly because this is a struggle area for myself. I'm speaking from the first person narrative here with how much of a struggle that this is. Okay, so the next area for growth where folks often struggle, and that people from a funding perspective, or people who are putting on and curating programs should keep in mind, is that there is a struggle to articulate. Um, well, I'll start with the triumph though. I find that a lot of first-time applicants are very passionate and very excited about what they're trying to work on in the project that they have. And in terms of storytelling, its meaningfulness to their community or to themselves. Um, there's a really strong articulation of the why maybe behind this project, or what they're trying to do. The struggle is in articulating the impact and some of the more fine planning details like timelines, and again those kind of budget requirements and those kinds of things. Those are the areas of struggle, and there's a lot of reasons for that. There's actually quite a few cultural differences in terms of quality versus quantity importance, and some Western non-Western frameworks that lead to a difference in focus and what people will actually write about when they apply to something, or what people will write about in those reports that they give back maybe at the end of the grant, or the quarterly reports, or just anything that's required in writing from applicants, or maybe even awardees after the fact. They'll focus on what it means and kind of the story and very specific content, but not necessarily always the impact or the things that make good newsletter content, and the things that you that you want people to write back to you about. And that can be mitigated in a lot of ways. You can be really clear about what I like in in our applications that we have is we actually kind of ask them to talk about the number of people that could be involved in different events and some more of that impact, and just being really intentional that you're looking for that kind of information, so that people will write that kind of information. The last area for growth is in those meaningful partnerships, collaborations, and finding kind of supports or target audiences. This is a struggle for first-time applicants in particular because they might be earlier in their career or their nonprofit lifetime. They might not have as many projects and behind them that they can call on past collaborations, in order to push a current project forward. This is an issue for smaller entities because they may not have as much to bring to the table in a partnership. They may not be and is invited to as many networking events and things because they might not put on as much programming constantly throughout the year. They might not be fresh in people's minds as far as people to call to do like special artist talks and galas and lunches and things like that. Applicants, again, from communities which have been exploited or divested from can struggle to create meaningful partnerships because generationally speaking, the wealth has been unfairly distributed, and they may not have, they may be the first person in their family running a nonprofit, for instance. And so this could be an issue because they may not have family members or family friends or people who also are directors of things, and so there's a little bit of that access difference. And then entities whose mission or scope is actually very specific or maybe actually limited based on their funding can struggle to find meaningful partnerships as well because they're so specific. And while it could be a good thing and a bad thing. So that's kind of that's definitely a consideration. And then applicants who have disabilities or caregiving responsibilities. So, for instance, I've got a 3-year-old. It's a struggle to go to 7 p.m. galas and like fancy events, and sit with people, have like a 2-hour dinner. That's difficult, right? There's different seasons of life. And then, of course, if you do have a disability, like a lot of these kind of fancy events will be in inaccessible buildings, or you've got to go up to like a special loft area. And it's just anyway, I'm probably being too specific here, but these are my own experiences. So yeah, people who may have additional responsibilities beyond their professional are going to struggle with bandwidth a little bit, to go to extra events and those kind of side conversations and things that will happen organically for people who have more time. Um, and just literally maybe even a car to get there and things like that. Um, Also, people who are immigrants or who would be considered transplants who don't have significant roots in a place may struggle too with meaningful partnerships and collaborations, and as well as people who don't speak English incredibly well. But I put an asterisk on that one because this does not mean that you can't find meaningful partnerships and collaborations, but often it can be siloed. So for instance, in Lawrence, working with the Spanish speaking communities, I mean, there's a whole lot of supporters and there's a huge network. It's not a very diverse one, right? And so in order to find those collaborations and partnerships from outside of your own communities, not being able to speak English very well can be a significant barrier. And so that's something also to think about in promotion and outreach. But there are things that you can do, and this is not an exhaustive list. These are just, again, some of the FAQs and kind of quick responses that I've been able to help people with who reach out wanting to know, what are some best practices with community outreach and engagement. So the first tip is to provide information and more information and yet more information. And part of this is a perspective thing. So you're in your institution or your nonprofit, your program. And so you are inundated with information about your organization's mission and vision and capacities and what they're really looking for and their goals. And so trying your best to think from an outside perspective from somebody that is not in your shoes, that doesn't have your specific role. So in terms of the application stage, um, like I mentioned before, being really clear about what's expected in the application, how much time people will need to allocate, which documents should they have handy, having a list of all of the documents or like your EIN or your SAM-UEI or any of those things is really helpful. Um, and also knowing in terms of the review process, how long the review process is, what it entails, what they can expect in terms of follow-up, what is the rubric or the qualifying criteria. All of this is important. All of this is important to reduce questions coming into you. So, you're helping your assistant out by just putting this information out there up front. They're not going to get questions about, well, when do I know if I got if I'm being granted or not, or awarded or not. By putting that information at the front, that's helpful and can reduce questions coming in. And it also just helps, people submit their application on time and understand kind of they can plan their project around that, your own timeline. In terms of after things have been awarded or when they will be, being really clear about expectations as far as deliverables. Are they expected to credit or use certain logos? Are there meetings that they're going to be required to go to? Are there like monthly check-ins? Just being really clear about those things because that actually matters. I mean, it matters at the application stage. But for folks who have limited capacities or maybe limited access, um, you know, to internet and things like that, knowing that they have to be on a monthly call and when that call is actually pretty important. Um, as well as letting them know when there are resources that could be available to them, particularly if you have an excellent communication support person, like we have Ben Stanton helping us out. If you have somebody like that on your team, you should let them know that, hey, if you apply to this program, or we select you as an artist in our call for artists, or whatever it is, that we will promote you on social media, or we have a newsletter and we're going to send that out, to our listserv and things like that. For instance, with I'm a co-founder of Black Lawrence, which is a literature and arts collective here in Lawrence. But when we collaborated with the Lawrence Art Center, it was really important to us to know that they were going to be doing a lot of the marketing and promotion for our monthly open mics, because that's, again, it's hard to stay on top of that and to post across all the different mediums. And Lawrence Art Center has a pretty good reach, so that was a huge determining factor in our meetings when we decided if we were going to do this collaboration or not, because that's a huge value add, right? In addition to being paid by the Lawrence Art Center. So being really clear about the resources that you can offer can also elicit more diverse or just more applicants in general too. And it helps them utilize that support, which also saves work for you. Because if you have somebody that you award who sends you, hey, here's a 2x2 graphic, here's my event description, um, that saves your communication person some work, right? So being able to communicate that you have this resource helps them use the resource, reduces the amount of work you have to do to extend the resource. It's like a feedback loop, right? So last but not least, at least on this slide, is modes of contact. So by having virtual office hours, being really clear about, hey, here's an email you can reach out to, or even a phone number. I like to give out my phone number because especially some of our more mature applicants, they like to talk on the phone, or it's just easier for them to do that, as well as some of the younger applicants as well. But also sharing your office location if you have a brick and mortar office. If there's grant info sessions, those are really nice. Even if you think that they're not necessary, they are necessary to someone. And just even offering those, like for instance, we offered a pop-up grant info session. I think it was the week leading up to the end of our application cycle here at the Kansas Arts Commission. And we only had one person attend it, but I got like 20 emails with questions. So that was valuable. So even if regardless of how many attendees you have, you're still getting those points of contact with people and getting those questions. And just in the same vein of providing more information than you think you need to, I loved this. This was from Dr. Nishani Frazier from KU. I worked with her on a digital storytelling project at the Hall Center, and we were talking about research methods and kind of ethical practices and consent. And I actually love to combine those with artistic practice. I think that researchers and artists have a lot in common, and that was actually my master's portfolio. Anyway, so I actually use a lot of like kind of research ethics principles in terms of outreach and things in the artist world. But she talks about having a glossary of the terms that you're using. Or even definitions along the way where needed. Because even if you think, I mean, a word might be commonly used, but what's your organization's definition of it? What is important to you guys? And being able to put that in there, and especially for words that may not be accessible, putting that in there allows everybody to understand, which can also diversify your applicant pool. And then in terms of outreach too, thinking about putting things into multiple languages, I would say in Kansas, Spanish, Arabic, Mandarin are pretty common. If you're specifically in Lawrence, Swahili is also up there, Burmese, there's a couple of different, maybe additional languages. But just thinking about the community that you're in, what are important languages, but at the same time, not like make sure if you're offering something in a language too, that maybe that there could be somebody on your team that could help as well with that language. All right. So flexibility equals diverse participation. I know that from an organizational standpoint, it's important to have policies and guidelines and things that you'll do because we think that it increases fairness. So, first come, first serve, applications are due at this time, and all of that. But I want to take you guys on a walk with me just a little bit to consider, flexibility as a point of fairness, right? So, bending the rules at times moderately within moderation can actually help in terms of diversification to get more of those first time applicants, applicants that are smaller entities, and things like that. So, considering plain language when you're describing your events or when you're describing an opportunity, when you're wording your application. Academic and advanced language can not only create barriers, which is one way to think about it, but it also obscures your purpose in a way, right? I mean, if you're not really clearly and directly effectively communicating what it is exactly that you're looking for, you're going to end up with applications all over the place, which again is not so good on the review side. In terms of application too, offering multiple methods. So I know that we're all moved away from paper, but I at least, and I only have 3 years experience with the Kansas Arts Commission specifically, but each year I've had to send a paper application to someone and kind of help them in that way. So don't sleep on the paper application route. Also, video submissions are becoming quite popular in terms of equitable application design. And video submissions can be great. It depends on how many applications that you're really getting. So something to think about. But there's also, transcribers that can transcribe video submissions or audio submissions can be very helpful. Okay, so considering late submissions, within reason, maybe 3 days, 5 days, 7 days late. Um, if it bothers anyone, you can always detract points in the review process if necessary to even the playing field. But you'll be really surprised, I guess, if the people who are doing really great things are busy, right? They tend to be. And you might be missing out on being connected to really cool projects or really great artists or things like that if you are very hard and fast on a deadline. So even a 24 hours extended deadline or 48 hours might elicit something that could be of interest to your organization. And yeah, it would be equitable too, for people that struggle to get things in. And then thinking about the role of professionalism. So, in some ways, corporate practices have creeped in to nonprofit culture for sure, and just in general, the way that we conduct ourselves. And so, kind of challenging this notion of one right way or worship of the written word, quantity over quality, right? So, privileging more information and more writing versus concise to the point writing. Um, Thinking about urgency as well, again, with around deadlines and other things like that. So just being flexible around what you're looking for and how you want it done, or maybe not thinking so much about how things are worded, but more about what is being worded, right? So not does it sound pretty, but is it good, right? And that can be really hard in terms of bias, especially in review and paneling. Um, just checking the chat. Um, so yeah, being able to mitigate, for these things in your program and mission and how you're wording things and the way you expect things to look, just being flexible there. And I think this is my last bucket, but thinking about how you offer things and diversifying them to therefore diversify the people who might come to your events or apply to your opportunities or get involved. Um, consider tiered opportunities for emerging mid-career and established artists. There could definitely be programs and entities, that are maybe more geared towards one or the other of these things. You'll see like in a lot of like kind of college towns, maybe more so those emerging artists and like residencies, studio space, those kinds of things being offered. And then in the bigger cities with really big venues, maybe the more established artists like kinds of offerings. And then in terms of curation or program development, diversifying solicitations for mediums and scopes. So for instance, a visual artist might be looking for a long-term opportunity that offers studio space or a budget for materials and supplies, like a residency, or a performing artist might be interested in creating, a single project or piece for their portfolio, basically artistic practice type of unrestricted grants, but they don't need studio space, and so that's something that's more along the lines of calls for artists or specific programs. So, and then thinking about the modes of promotion, I think that digital stuff's cool. MailChimp and newsletters are cool. Um, but for a lot of communities of color, particularly, word of mouth, and quarter sheets on cars and in places, cafes, the library, different kind of bulletins, grocery store bulletins, tabling at events. All of these things are actually still pretty relevant. And I mean, it just depends on the community, of course, but actually going slow to go fast. So actually going into communities, attending their events, offering resources or information, and just generally supporting the movement and the art already happening in these communities before you go in saying, hey, here's what I'm doing, come be a part of it. So instead, before you start trying to elicit interest or people applying to your programs, going in and supporting, being a presence. Understanding what it is that they're interested in, and then maybe developing programming around it. But just being a friendly face and spending time, that is so important. And we talk about this in research methodology as well, working with communities, and especially for community-based kinds of focuses, things like that. You kind of need to be out in the community, all the communities, to get a good sense of that. And so writing programs and curation in a vacuum for a community without the community will only get you so far. And then thinking really intentionally too around first person narratives. This can't be possible all the time, and it is nice when people from outside the community want to offer their talents and their expertise, to help uplift the story or bring awareness to issues that might be facing a neighborhood or a community. But consider privileging projects or artists, who are addressing issues that pertain to their own communities or tell the story of their own communities, and thinking from the first person narrative perspective. And again, that can't always be possible. Specifically the cross community inclusive kinds of projects like a mural, things like that, that might you might have an artist that obviously that artist can't come from, can't represent everything. But working within a very specific story or specific event that happened, it's really nice if the person leading that project is somebody involved or impacted. Okay. So I've thrown a lot of, again, this is very general information at you guys, but I would say if you go away with two things, um, I would like to talk about language for a moment and clarity. So the requirements and goals of the program or the event or the funding should be clear and accessibly worded. Okay, so there's the report that you send back to the funder, and that can be heady and lofty and pretty, but what you're maybe communicating on the community level or to in terms of soliciting applications, that doesn't have to be like the novel level of writing. Thinking about so in a way, if you think about it, if you write in academic speak, it's kind of like adding things to your rubric in a sense, right? Because you're setting a bar and some barriers in the description of a thing, but then it's kind of like an unspoken requirement, right? So if you speak, if your solicitation or application is worded and structured in a way that it would be best for somebody at a PhD level to be able to complete it easily. It's kind of like requiring a 10 years of operating budgets or a terminal degree in your application, in your applicant background, right? So unless the grant or the program is specifically geared towards established artists, which can totally be the case, um, you might want to adjust the language so that it's actually fair and aligns with the actual grading rubric. Otherwise, you have kind of hidden expectations and barriers baked into what you're doing. And again, that pretty language is really great for the funding report. It's really great for certain like artist talks and like, there's time and a place. But when you're communicating about something that you're then saying um, is readily or accessible or equitably available or community based, it needs to, think third grade language, seventh grade language. And it's not to say that people don't understand this language, because people understand a lot more than we give them credit for. But when we're asking people to do something with that language or that prompt, that's another level of, then they're having to kind of guess what you're asking for. And so anyway, I could go on and on about this particular point, and I do, and I will if you guys have questions about it. But anyway, being really intentional that what you're actually looking for and the level of what you're looking for, that level of language aligns with what you're putting out there about it, and not being essentially biased in what you're asking for. Okay. Um, Clarity around the rubric or the criteria. And if you go back to a time when you may have been a student, um, maybe in high school or further, you probably really liked having a syllabus and a grading rubric. Can you imagine walking into the class and you've got to do this thing for 6 months or 12 months, a period of performance, and you don't have those things? And so just thinking really intentionally from that lens, don't make people guess what you're looking for, and being clear with the criteria will actually help you, because now you're not having, as in terms of a red flag review of your pool, you're not, in terms of screening ineligible applicants, you're gonna reduce that, as well as the back and forth to gather more information. Um, but people, when things are unclear, so I'll just again speak from personal experience. Black Lawrence, my community group, we probably apply to 15 grants maybe a year, a little over one a month. Um, and if something is difficult to understand and they don't have a grading rubric, we don't, why would we spend the time applying to that opportunity? Because if it's not clear, if they don't know what they want, how do we write to them about how we provide what it is that they want? And how do we, it's just, it's unclear. And when things are not clear, for people who might have limited capacity, because we don't have a full-time administrative assistant or a grant writer, we're just going to skip it. And you also want to put really intentionally what exactly you're looking for. Um, I can't, maybe I can count them, but there's been a couple of instances where we were reading an application and it said that they wanted community-based organizations that were made up of, they like, when they kind of spoke to us by talking about what they wanted, that they want Black-led organizations, or they want this or that. That was inspiring. That made us want to apply, because it was clear to us what they were looking for, and that we had what they were looking for, and that this was a good expenditure of our time. So um, think about listing, again, more information than you think you need to put, because they're not in your program or in your organization. So I'll stop there for a moment. Christy, do you want me to stop for questions now, or do you want? Yeah. All right.
So I wanted to just pipe in here quickly and say, Alex, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. One of the things that really stuck out for me, there are many, many things, but one of the things that you said, um, language, of course, making sure that when we're reaching out to, so, from my perspective, my goal is to make sure that the work that we do at Kansas Arts Commission and across the state is really open and accessible and inclusive to all Kansans. So Kansans of color, Kansans in indigenous communities, Kansans with and without disabilities. And that's where my training and research comes in. One of the things that I think was so important, Alex, was talking about the researchy piece and like the language piece, and like doing research with people as opposed to doing research on people. So it's like a participatory action model for research. Of course, I did a lot of research in my PhD. So when you're programming for arts in your communities, programming with people as opposed to programming about people, programming on people, making sure that you are including at your table, on your board, on your staff, in your cast list, and everybody that you're working with, people who may not already be at that table. So people on your board who might have a disability, people who are looking at programming who might or might not have a disability, like making sure that everyone's voice is heard so that you really are doing programming and arts-based work with community as opposed to about, if that makes sense to everybody. Here's everybody.
Um, yeah, my job at Haskell, managing the research grant is, for the first time, a lot of Indigenous communities are being collaborators on the research projects and co-creators and not just research subjects, not the, yeah. So it's been quite a journey over there as well.
It's great.
I will say from an artist or a community standpoint, this is a really good time because it's the spring. In the spring and the fall, you have this kind of grant application cycles. This is a really good time if you're a community organization to reach out to get those meaningful partnerships, or if you're an artist trying to find opportunities with local nonprofits or arts organizations, because we're about to enter quarter 4, and a lot of people have the end of their grant year on June 30. And so this is a good time to reach out and try to make some collaborations and spend up the rest of that money that they might have available. But then also for people that might be actively applying to grants right now, that they might be able to consider you, or you guys can write it together. Or if they've recently submitted a grant, like for instance on February 28th, like the Kansas Arts Commission grants, they have recently submitted something and they can kind of keep you in mind going forward. So this is actually a really good networking time of the year, for all levels in the arts sector.
Yeah, I feel like you're totally right, Alex. Networking and partnerships. One of the programs that I have been really excited about, we did this a summer or so ago. The Kennedy Center sponsors art. It's called VSA, Very Special Arts. The Kennedy Center family, the Kennedy family launched arts programming because they had the sister Rosemary, one of the Kennedy family had significant disabilities. And so VSA, Very Special Arts, is a really, really cool program launched by the Kennedy Center where they ask folks around the country to be a VSA site. So we here in Lawrence, Kansas, we were a site 2 summers ago now here in Lawrence at the Lawrence Arts Center, and we developed a camp with kids with and without disabilities. So mentoring and friendship, and that is inclusion with and without disabilities, not just kids with disabilities, because then they are separate. They're in their own camp. This was an all-inclusive camp that I ran with a great team here in Lawrence. But speaking to that, like networking and partnering and collaborating and thinking about ways in your community, how could I do a thing, right? With folks from Black Lawrence, how could I do a thing from the Indigenous community near me, near my town? How could I do a thing with kids with disabilities, high schoolers who have a disability, high schoolers who are in the special education program at school? How can I think broader in terms of what I'm doing, the grants that I want to write for the state of Kansas in particular, but other grants as well, so that we're making sure, again, that everyone is at the table and everyone is part of that process, the planning, the brainstorming, the getting excited about making art in Kansas, that process.
I can share a little bit more about my availability too. So again, my office hours are on Tuesdays. This is all Central Time, 11 to 2 p.m. And I'll make sure that we can circulate that office hours link. But you guys can hop on to ask me any kinds of questions, or if you have a question about working with like Potawatomi Prairie Band or anything like that. So they could be specific questions or general questions. Um, and I'm happy to talk with you or look at applications or things like that, kind of talk about like, oh, language, here, or just different kinds of considerations um, that you might have. Um, and yeah, just to chat. I see Jeff in the chat about kind of like website promotion,
Mm.
essentially outreach. So most website builders, so I work in Wix, WordPress, Squarespace, like all of the major ones. And I'm gonna go I need to tell my team this. I'm going on a training in May to do more coding for learn more about that for websites. But websites are really cool, and a lot of the main website builders that we have now will allow you to look into analytics. And so the first step would be to go into your analytics, see what's going on, see as much detail as you can. But a lot of websites can be difficult to remember, and so I love creating bit.lys or other link shortening there's different kinds of those as well, where you can kind of have a shorter, quicker, easy to remember link that will lead people to your website, as opposed to asking people to remember your website's name. And then also being really intentional about how easy is it to find your website. So for Black Lawrence, we were lucky enough to find blacklawrence.org. That was that was pretty lucky. But not everybody is so lucky. And so just being really flexible, trying to find like the best website name, the best domain name that you possibly can. And then promoting it any and everywhere. So on Black Lawrence's social media pages, we often had our website name as like the cover photo. So again, you can never over promote where people can then go to find more information. So putting that in the your bio link on your Instagram or Twitter, things like that, or it's called X now. And then also when you're posting about your website, consider having like a launch of your website, like really just promoting like, hey, our website is going live on Friday this date. And just really like creating a lot of sensation around it will help draw attention to people even knowing that you have a website. Making sure it's on your business cards. For some reason that often gets missed. People will put their contact information and what they do, but not the website. And so just really making sure that you're promoting it, and then thinking about the analytics of times of day to post about your website too. So on a lot of social media, like Facebook is going to be 9, 12, 3, 5 p.m. essentially. So kind of as people are at work, they tend to check their Facebook because they could be at their computer and do it under their boss's watch. But then for mediums like Instagram and kind of the other kinds of social media, those are going to have different analytics for the best times of day to post. And so as you're promoting about any of your programs, actually this applies to more than just your websites. Think about the time of day, think about which platform you're posting it to. Think about how the link appears, making QR codes and putting that on cards. I like the two-sided cards. So Black Lawrence has a square two-sided card where on the one side it's a QR code to our website, and then on the other side it just says like Black Lawrence or something. So you can make your cards pretty simple with like shorter links and QR codes. And then as you're making like digital, I know I'm going on here for a second because I am passionate about website building and graphic design, but as you're making digital flyers, you can hyperlink your logo to go to your website. You can hyperlink anything on the flyer to go to your website. And so just really just promoting it, make sure your logo leads to it. If it like lists your name on the flyer, have that be hyperlinked to go to your website. And then just make sure that you're updating it and referring to it constantly. If you have more questions about website building or graphic design and how to make like your flyers accessible, like there's different programs to tell if people who are colorblind can see what's on your flyer and things like that. So yeah.
Following up on that, yeah, accessibility and websites and all of that stuff. The NEA and all the folks that I've met in my role as accessibility specialist here at Kansas, we always talk as a group across the country about, making sure everyone has access. So not just about sharing what you're doing, but everybody can get to the website and write, and you're building a website that everybody can read, understand, closed captions, all of that stuff. I want to make sure everyone knows that the self-assessment of your organization is really, really crucial. We have a self-assessment attached to our grants here in Kansas. There's a really, really good one out of Mass Culture. It's Massachusetts, but they did this huge program within the last year with Open Door Arts, and they have a self-assessment that's all online that you can just kind of punch through. And it's really, really comprehensive, and it makes you think about, what does it really mean? What does accessibility really mean? It's not just ramps and wheelchair spaces. Your doors are wide enough for wheelchairs. It's so much more than that. What I've learned, and I'm learning as I go from all of my colleagues across the country and with the NEA, is like, as long as you're thinking about it, as long as you are really trying as an organization, as long as you start to realize, right, what inclusion and where, what the what accessibility really means at all levels. You know what? I can send the self-assessment. We have our Kansas document, and I'll send the one that I just mentioned out to the group if that's okay. And Alex, we can send your slides to the group. Is that correct? Because that information is in the slides. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely send out the
Yes.
slides, and then I'll just speak this out really quick because I know that we have a recording and that what's in the chat won't be in that recording. But I just put in there that Google sites are actually free and pretty easy to build and use. If you can if you can use Microsoft Word, you can make a Google site essentially. But they're free to anyone who has like a Gmail or a Google account, which most people do. Or you can set one of those up for free. But that's definitely a good place to start. And it's kind of like if you don't have like an operating budget to pay $200 to $300 a year to maintain a website, it's about that much on Squarespace, and a domain name and everything on the Google site is free.
I'll send the self-assessment stuff because there's a couple of different ones. There's different states. Some of them do it a little more in-depth and comprehensively. It is all out of the NEA, and then people have kind of expanded and dug into it a little bit more in-depth. So Alexis, I see your question, and I'll send a package of information out to everyone in this group. Thank you. One of the most important things I've learned in my work as an accessibility specialist is that your budget is a moral document. So as Alex was saying, when you're writing your grants and you're planning your programming and you've decided what you're going to do for the state or any other funders, your budget and where you're putting your dollars speaks to your priorities, right? And your focus. And so I guess what we're trying to say here as a team is like, make sure you're expanding that focus to include everyone in your community. We can't just do the same things over and over. We got to make sure everybody is at the table. That's really the whole goal of these lunch and learns is how to get everyone to the table. So again, we will send out the stuff that we've mentioned today. This is our first lunch and learn. So I'm very grateful to everyone for coming. Yes, Connie, we will send out everything. We'll send the recording and our slides so you can see the information that Alex has come up with. And I came up with a couple of slides towards the end, but please reach out to us if you have questions. And thanks, Alex, for putting that link in there. And I'm so glad that it's good information and that it's useful information to all of you. We really want these lunch and learns to be useful to you. So let's just stay in conversation. Alex, do you have anything you wanted to finish up with?
Just again that I'm available to you. I love talking to people and kind of answering these questions. I know sometimes talking one-on-one can be a little more effective, especially with these kind of deeper subjects. And so I'll talk with people for a long time, just about these things. I do also want to put out there that all of our field reps do have a bit of a budget to travel to meet with people and to do things, maybe buy coffee, things like that. And I love doing that too. Like I would like to go out to coffee and talk about this stuff. So please don't feel like it is not a burden or a bother at all. And I always learn stuff too, talking to people like, oh, that's helpful. You guys do that. And I can like take that and share that. And so it's always a two-way street. But yeah, we have myself, Christy, and others on the team as well. So if you ever have questions for us that maybe me or Christy don't know, we have other people that we can talk to and ask. And you guys saw how quickly we found out about the Rural Murals program, and that's not even one of our programs. So our people are good. They find out, they're investigative. They're very good at finding information. So, and I think the last thing that I'll mention is that I can help you with our programs or others. And I actually really enjoy doing that because our grant is a one-to-one matching style of funding. And so being able to help people find the funding elsewhere and find out like what's in kind, what is not, and kind of navigating how to get things eligible is really a passion of mine. So if it's about the budget stuff, if it's about the more curation and like content and qualitative stuff, those kinds of things, I'm here for all of that stuff.
So please do reach out. Yeah, let us know what it is that you're mulling over, things that you want to think about as you're thinking about your programming for the next year. If you have questions for Alex or I will set up some office hours. Thank you, Alex, for the reminder. I think I might do a Tuesday afternoon. I think you're doing early, like midday, 11 to 2. I might do like a 2:30 to 5:30 or something like that. And I can cover, yeah, anything accessibility, inclusion, like all of those kinds of questions. So we will send everything we've mentioned out to this group, and we hope that you'll stay in touch with us and ask questions. And then, yeah, come on the 14th at noon. We're doing that earlier in the day, an actual lunchtime slot. to visit with Kim Nagstet. So yeah, check her out. She's brilliant. So think of questions that you might have for her. She's awesome. All right. Thank you everyone so very much for joining us today. Thank you, Alex, my partner in all things amazing and inclusive. And
Yeah.
thank you, Ben, for helping us out today. I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. Reach out if you need us.